Control what you can and accept what you cannot. This simple yet profound wisdom from Marcus Aurelius isn't just ancient philosophy. It's the secret weapon of every great leader who's ever stood unshaken in the face of chaos. Think about the last time you faced a high-pressure situation, maybe a critical meeting, a tough decision, or a team looking to you for direction. What if you could navigate those moments with the calm clarity of a Stoic, turning pressure into power and uncertainty into unwavering authority? That's what this video is about, not just learning Stoicism, but wielding it. Because here's the truth: Stoicism wasn't designed for dusty textbooks. It was forged in the fires of real leadership, from Roman battlefields to modern boardrooms. And today, you're going to discover how to make it work for you. Let's be honest, ambition alone isn't enough. You could have the sharpest skills, the boldest vision, but without the right mindset, even the strongest leaders crack under pressure. That's where Stoicism steps in, not as a passive philosophy, but as an active toolkit for domination. Resilience isn't just about bouncing back, it's about charging forward when others freeze. Focus isn't just avoiding distractions, it's laser-guided precision in chaos. And emotional control, that's your superpower, the ability to choose logic over reaction, strategy over impulse. These aren't abstract ideas, they're the pillars of true authority, and they're within your reach. So how do you actually put this into practice? That's what we're diving into today. You'll walk away with battle-tested techniques: how to reframe setbacks as fuel, how to silence the noise of doubt, and how to lead with a presence that commands respect without saying a word. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about channeling them into unstoppable momentum. Whether you're leading a team, building a career, or mastering your own potential, these Stoic strategies are your edge. Ready to transform pressure into your advantage? Let's begin. A Stoic leader doesn't rise above emotion, they rise through it. Epictetus put it bluntly: no man is free who is not master of himself. That's the core of this mindset, not denying what you feel, but refusing to let it hijack your judgment. Picture a ship's captain in a storm. They feel the fear, the urgency, but their hands stay steady on the wheel. That's the difference between reacting and responding, and history's greatest leaders, they mastered this art. Take George Washington at Valley Forge. Freezing temperatures, starving troops, whispers of mutiny, yet his letters reveal not panic but precision. He acknowledged the hardship, then focused relentlessly on solutions, securing supplies, drilling discipline, rallying morale. That's Stoic leadership in action, seeing reality clearly, then acting with unshakable intent. Now, here's where most stumble: they confuse detachment with indifference. Stoicism isn't about becoming cold or robotic. It's about creating space between stimulus and action, that critical pause where choice lives. Think of your last high-stakes moment. Maybe your team missed a deadline or a client blindsided you with criticism. What flooded your mind first? Frustration, defensiveness. Those emotions aren't weaknesses, they're signals. The Stoic leader hears them, then asks, does this serve my mission? Because every decision is a fork in the road, one path ruled by impulse, the other by purpose. So let's make this practical. Your first tool, the pause. Before you speak, before you decide, even just 3 seconds to breathe. In that space, ask 2 questions. What part of this can I control? And what's the next right move? That's how you train the muscle of emotional agility. Because leadership isn't about avoiding storms, it's about knowing you can navigate any storm without losing your course. Here's how the Stoic dichotomy of control separates the leaders who thrive from those who merely survive. It's the razor-sharp focus on what's yours to command, your effort, your decisions, your attitude, and the deliberate release of everything else. Seneca put it perfectly when he said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How many hours do we waste agonizing over outcomes we can't change, market shifts, others' opinions, even yesterday's mistakes? A reactive leader drowns in that noise. A proactive one, they redirect that energy like a laser. Take a moment to picture this. You're leading a team through a product launch, and suddenly, a key supplier fails to deliver. The reactive leader spirals, blaming, panicking, scrambling to assign fault. The Stoic leader, they pause. They know the delay itself isn't in their control, but their response is. Maybe they secure an alternative vendor. Maybe they recalibrate timelines with transparency. Maybe they turn the setback into a rallying cry for the team. The difference isn't luck or talent, it's trained focus. This is where Stoicism transforms from philosophy to competitive edge. Every day, you're bombarded with variables. Deadlines move, clients pivot, systems fail. But your circle of control, that's unshakable. Your preparation, your communication, your ability to adapt. Think of a CEO navigating a PR crisis. They can't control the headlines, but they can control their message, their team's morale, their next strategic move. That's the dichotomy in action, not passive acceptance, but fierce ownership of your agency. So here's your challenge. Grab a notebook and draw 2 circles. Label the first, My Control. Fill it with the tangible levers you pull daily. How you prepare for meetings, the tone you set with colleagues, the way you prioritize tasks. The second circle, Outside My Control. Pour into it the distractions masquerading as priorities, competitors' moves, others' perceptions, even the weather. The moment you start acting from the first circle, you're not just leading, you're commanding the field. Because true authority begins when you stop trying to control the storm and start mastering your ship. Marcus Aurelius faced rebellions, plagues, and betrayals during his reign, yet his private writings reveal a mind trained to see obstacles not as curses, but as raw material for growth. The impediment to action advances action, he wrote. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the Stoic secret to resilience. It's not about avoiding the storm, but learning to sail in winds that would break others. Consider the modern entrepreneur Sarah Blakely, who faced rejection after rejection while pitching her idea for Spanx. Instead of crumbling, she framed each no as data, refining her pitch until she landed the deal that built a billion-dollar empire. Failure wasn't her enemy, it was her unwitting mentor. This mindset shift separates leaders who bend from those who forge ahead. When a project collapses or criticism strikes, the average person sees a dead end. The Stoic leader, they spot a detour sign. Think of a tree strengthening its roots against relentless wind. The very force that threatens it is what makes it unshakable. That's why the Stoics practiced voluntary hardship, not to punish themselves, but to inoculate against adversity. They knew comfort was the enemy of resilience. Now reflect on your own defining challenge. Maybe it was a career setback, a public mistake, or a personal loss. In that moment, did you see yourself as a victim of circumstance or the architect of your comeback? Here's the pivot point. Resilience isn't something you're born with. It's a skill honed through deliberate practice. Every time you choose to mine meaning from misery, you're not just recovering, you're upgrading your leadership operating system. So next time you're tested, borrow the Stoics' 3-question framework. First, what can this teach me? Second, how does this reveal my strength? And third, the most potent, if this happened for me, not to me, what opportunity is it unveiling? Because true resilience isn't about bouncing back to where you were. It's about launching forward to where you're meant to be. Consider how often leadership fails not from lack of vision, but from fractured attention, the emails pinging during strategy sessions, the mental rehearsals of tomorrow's problems while today's opportunities slip by. Epictetus warned his students, if you seek truth, be present, not as a vague ideal, but as a discipline, because presence isn't just about focus, it's the bedrock of authority. When a leader's mind is scattered, their influence scatters with it, but when they're fully anchored in the moment, that's when they command rooms without raising their voice. History's most decisive leaders shared this trait. Take Theodore Roosevelt's famous ability to listen, not just hear, but absorb during high-stakes negotiations. While others skimmed surfaces, he'd catch nuances in tone, shifts in body language, the unsaid beneath the words. That level of attention didn't come from charisma alone. It was trained like a Stoic's morning meditation, because here's the irony, in an age of constant connection, true presence has become the rarest form of power. Every notification, every multitasking urge is a tiny abdication of leadership. So how do you reclaim it? Start with this battlefield-tested exercise from Marcus Aurelius' own practice. Twice daily, perhaps at your desk or before a meeting, pause for just 60 seconds. Breathe deeply, then anchor yourself with 3 sensory details: the weight of your pen, the hum of the air conditioner, the texture of your chair. Why? You're not just calming your mind, you're rehearsing the art of noticing, because leadership decisions aren't made in the abstract. They're made here, now, in the messy reality right in front of you. The payoff is profound. Next time you're in a conflict, instead of reacting to the loudest voice, you'll catch the hesitant team member who holds the solution. Instead of defaulting to old playbooks, you'll spot the subtle shift in the market others miss. This is Stoic mindfulness in action, not passive observation, but active engagement with reality as it unfolds. Your presence becomes your competitive edge, the quiet force that turns chaotic rooms into clear paths forward. Try this today. Before your next decision, ask, am I solving the problem in front of me or the ghosts of past battles? Then watch how clarity follows attention like an arrow to its mark. Motivation is a fickle flame. It flickers when you need it most, burning bright one moment and vanishing the next. Seneca saw right through this when he wrote, "No wind favors the sailor who has no destined port." In other words, waiting for motivation to strike is like waiting for the perfect breeze. You'll be stranded while others sail ahead. Leadership isn't fueled by bursts of inspiration. It's built on the quiet, relentless engine of discipline. Think of the greatest athletes, innovators, or generals. What separates them isn't talent or luck, but the daily grind they embrace when no one's watching. Discipline is the Stoic's secret weapon because it doesn't rely on how you feel. Motivation whispers, "Not today." Discipline answers, "Do it anyway." Consider a Navy SEAL pre-dawn workout or a surgeon reviewing case notes after a 12-hour shift. They're not powered by some magical surge of enthusiasm. They've trained their will to act regardless of circumstance. That's the mark of true authority, the ability to show up fully, even especially when it's hard. Here's how to start forging that unbreakable discipline. Pick one non-negotiable habit, something small but significant. Maybe it's 5 minutes of journaling each morning, a nightly review of your priorities, or a strict no-phone rule during deep work. The key: consistency over intensity. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations in a single heroic session. He filled those pages day by day, often in the chaos of war camps. That's the power of ritual. It transforms aspiration into action. Your challenge for the next 7 days: commit to that one habit, not when it's convenient, but because it's inconvenient. Track your progress like a Stoic would, without self-criticism but with cold, honest reflection. Miss a day, reset, don't quit, because here's the truth every leader learns: discipline isn't about perfection. It's about showing up again and again until showing up becomes who you are. That's how you turn fleeting motivation into enduring mastery. Emotional detachment in leadership doesn't mean shutting off your humanity. It means refusing to let fleeting feelings steer the ship. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Picture a CEO during a shareholder revolt or a coach whose team just blew a championship game. The untrained leader might lash out, freeze, or make a desperate move to appease the crowd. But the Stoic leader, they feel the sting, acknowledge the pressure, then ask one critical question: what does this moment require of me? Take the high-stakes scenario of a company facing a PR disaster, say, a flawed product launch triggering public outrage. The emotional leader might panic, deleting comments, shifting blame, or overpromising fixes in a flurry of reactivity. The detached leader, though, operates differently. They'd pause to separate the noise from the signal, anger from customers, a signal to listen, not a cue to defend. Fear in the team, a signal to reassure, not a reason to retreat. This is emotional detachment in action, not indifference but intentional space between feeling and action. History's most effective leaders mastered this balance. When Abraham Lincoln received vicious criticism during the Civil War, he wrote what he called hot letters, fiery responses to his detractors, then filed them away unsent. He let the emotion flow onto the page, but not into his decisions. That's the Stoic edge, recognizing emotions as data, not directives. Your frustration in a boardroom might reveal a values clash. Your anxiety before a pitch might highlight unprepared areas. The key is to interrogate the emotion, not obey it. So here's your challenge: identify one emotion that's hijacked your leadership lately. Was it impatience during a slow-moving project, resentment toward a difficult colleague? Whatever it is, apply the Stoics' three-step drill. First, name it precisely. Is it anger, or is it really fear of losing control? Second, trace its root. What specific event triggered it? Third, ask, if I took this emotion out of the equation, what would the smartest version of me do next? Because true leadership isn't about having no emotions. It's about not letting emotions have you. The irony: the more you practice this detachment, the more powerfully you connect. Teams don't need leaders who pretend nothing affects them. They need leaders who demonstrate how to rise above reactivity. When you show up calm in chaos, focused in uncertainty, you don't just solve problems. You become the calm in the storm others steer by. That's the ultimate authority, not controlling the winds, but adjusting your sails so masterfully that others follow your course without question. Epictetus cut straight to the heart of powerful communication when he said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak." But Stoic wisdom takes this further. It's not just about speaking less, but making every word count with surgical precision. Think of the last time someone spoke to you with absolute clarity. No filler words, no hedging, just pure conviction. That's the kind of communication that doesn't just share information. It commands respect. Ancient Stoic leaders knew this intimately. When Julius Caesar reported his victory at Zela, he didn't ramble. He crafted 3 words that echoed through history: Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. That's the power of brevity married to purpose. Modern leadership drowns in noise, emails that could be bullet points, meetings that should have been memos, feedback wrapped in so many layers of politeness that the message vanishes. The Stoic antidote: speaking with intent. Before you open your mouth or hit send, ask Epictetus' razor-sharp question: is this necessary? If your words won't improve the situation or convey vital truth, silence isn't just golden, it's leadership. Consider how Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address reshaped a nation's grief in under 3 minutes, while the speaker before him droned for 2 hours. History remembers the message that respected people's time and intelligence. Here's where most professionals go wrong. They confuse brevity with haste. Stoic communication isn't about talking fast. It's about stripping away everything that dilutes your authority. Notice how reactive language creeps in. I think we might want to possibly consider. That's not humility, it's hesitation masquerading as caution. The Stoic leader replaces these with declarative statements rooted in reason. The data shows we should. Or our mission requires, not arrogance, clarity. When NASA engineers guided the Apollo 13 crew through a life-or-death crisis, every word had weight. No room for or maybe, just calibrated, life-saving precision. Your challenge: take your next important message, maybe a team email, a pitch, or a difficult conversation, and apply the Stoics' 3-filter test. First, truth: is what I'm saying unambiguously factual? Second, necessity: does this need to be said now? Third, kindness: is my phrasing constructive even when delivering hard truths? This isn't about becoming curt or cold. It's about removing the static so your signal comes through clear. Because when you master this art, people don't just hear you, they listen. And that's where real influence begins. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good leader should be one." That simple command cuts to the core of Stoic leadership. It's not about titles or tactics, but the daily practice of 4 timeless virtues: wisdom to see clearly, courage to act decisively, justice to serve others, and temperance to master yourself. These aren't abstract ideals, they're the operating system of leaders who leave lasting legacies. Consider the CEO who discovers a product defect after launch. The expedient path might be quiet recalls or careful spin, but the virtuous leader, they issue full transparency, recall units globally, and personally explain why safety outweighs profit. That's wisdom and courage in concert, seeing the hard truth, then acting on it despite the cost. History remembers leaders who anchored themselves in these virtues. When Abraham Lincoln formed his cabinet, he intentionally appointed political rivals, men who disagreed with him vehemently. That wasn't naivety, it was justice in action. He knew surrounding himself with diverse perspectives served the nation better than comfortable yes men. Contrast this with modern executives who prioritize loyalty over competence, creating echo chambers that miss looming threats. The Stoic leader understands virtue isn't convenient, but it's contagious. Teams mirror the integrity they see modeled. A sales director who praises ethical selling over inflated numbers doesn't just build revenue, they build character in their ranks. Here's where most leadership training gets it backwards. They treat virtues like accessories, nice to have, but secondary to results. The Stoics flipped that script. To them, virtue wasn't separate from success, it was the very foundation. Think of a ship's captain navigating treacherous waters. Their technical skill keeps the vessel moving, but their moral compass determines the destination. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his private journals obsess over one question: am I acting with integrity right now, not when it's easy, not when convenient? Now your leadership is being tested in small moments every day. That harmless exaggeration in a client meeting, the temptation to take credit for a team member's idea. The decision to overlook a high performer's toxic behavior because they deliver results. These are virtue's battlegrounds, the Stoic practice, the nightly review. Not just assessing what you accomplished, but how you governed yourself in the process. Did your words align with your values? Did your decisions uplift others or serve self-interest? This isn't about guilt, it's about calibration. So here's your challenge. Pick one virtue to consciously strengthen this week. If it's wisdom, pause before decisions to ask, what's the truest version of this situation? If courage, identify one uncomfortable truth you've been avoiding. For justice, spotlight an unsung contributor. Temperance, monitor one habit that subtly undermines your authority. Because leadership isn't about perfection, it's about direction. And when you walk the path of virtue, something remarkable happens. People don't just follow your orders. They follow your example. That's how Stoic principles transform managers into leaders worth remembering. Seneca once wrote, "No great thing is created suddenly." And those 9 words hold the key to leadership that outlasts trends, crises, and competition. Picture 2 farmers planting olive trees. One digs up the saplings weekly to check progress, while the other tends the soil patiently, knowing some growth happens unseen. That's the difference between impulsive leadership and Stoic endurance. History's most transformative leaders understood this. Nelson Mandela studied his opponent's language during 27 years in prison, transforming confinement into preparation. Warren Buffett built his empire not on quarterly wins, but on what he called the 20-year perspective. They weren't just waiting, they were compounding advantage while others chased shortcuts. Impulsive leaders crack under this truth. Urgency and importance rarely travel together. When a startup founder pivots strategy every quarter to please investors, they're not adapting, they're eroding trust. When a manager promotes flashy quick fixes over systemic solutions, they trade tomorrow's breakthrough for today's applause. The Stoics called this the poverty of haste, the delusion that speed equals progress. Ancient Rome's greatest generals knew battles could be won in a day, but empires were built over decades. That's why Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You're not disturbed by events, but by your judgments about them." The impatient leader sees delay as frustration. The Stoic sees it as refinement. Consider the case of Satya Nadella at Microsoft. When he took over in 2014, shareholders demanded immediate disruption. Instead, he invested years rebuilding culture, empowering engineers, deprioritizing cutthroat competition, even hosting company-wide book clubs on empathy. Critics called it soft. Then, slowly, something remarkable happened. Innovation that had stalled for years began flowing organically. Teams took risks without fear. Products like Azure and Teams emerged not from rushed mandates, but from patient collaboration. Microsoft's market cap didn't just grow, it multiplied 6-fold. Nadella's secret, he'd internalized Seneca's lesson. Time discovers truth. Now, here's your litmus test for Stoic patience. Grab paper and answer 3 questions. First, what's one goal you've abandoned because results took too long? Second, what evidence suggests you are closer to breakthrough than you realized? Third, if you knew success was guaranteed in 5 years, what would you start doing today and stop doing immediately? Because the long game isn't about passivity. It's about aligning daily actions with a vision so compelling that you'll outlast every skeptic, including the one in your own mirror. That's how ordinary leaders become legends, not by racing the clock, but by mastering it. Criticism stings, there's no way around it. Even the most confident leaders feel that initial flush of heat when someone questions their decisions or dismantles their work. But here's what Epictetus knew 2,000 years ago that most of us still struggle to grasp. If someone handed your body over to just any passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who comes along and allow them to upset you. That's the heart of Stoic resilience, not avoiding criticism, but refusing to let it hijack your peace or purpose. Let's dissect this. Not all criticism is created equal. Constructive feedback comes with specific actionable insights that help you grow. Maybe a mentor points out gaps in your strategy, or a team member suggests a more efficient process. That's gold. Destructive criticism, though, it's vague, personal, or rooted in someone else's insecurities. Think of the difference between a chef refining a recipe based on a food critic's detailed notes versus someone yelling, "This tastes terrible." From the back of the room, one improves your craft, the other is just noise. So how does a Stoic leader separate the signal from the static? Start with this 3-step framework. First, pause, don't react, breathe. Second, interrogate the source. Ask, is this person qualified to critique this? Are their intentions constructive? Third, extract value. Even harsh words might contain a kernel of truth. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in the late 90s, critics called the company irrelevant. Instead of dismissing them, he distilled their skepticism into fuel, simplifying product lines and focusing on design until Apple became the most valuable company in the world. Here's your challenge. Recall one recent criticism that bothered you. Now, apply the Stoics' reframe. If it was constructive, ask, how does this help me level up? If it was baseless, channel Marcus Aurelius. It's ridiculous to let someone else's words dictate your inner state. Write down one action step, whether it's improving a skill or simply practicing indifference to petty opinions. Because true authority isn't about being bulletproof, it's about knowing which arrows to dodge and which to study closely. That's how Stoics turn criticism into their sharpest whetstone. Marcus Aurelius left us a battle-tested formula for cutting through decision paralysis. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. That's not poetic fluff, it's neuroscience. Every choice you make is shaped by the mental environment you cultivate. Picture two leaders facing the same crisis. One drowns in what-ifs, their mind clouded by imagined catastrophes. The other, trained in Stoic clarity, sees the situation as a chessboard calculating moves, not fearing ghosts. This is the power of rational judgment, not the absence of emotion, but the presence of disciplined thought. Let's break down the Stoic decision-making framework into 4 actionable steps. First, define the real issue, not the symptom. When Starbucks faced plummeting sales in 2008, Howard Schultz didn't just slash prices. He identified the root problem. Stores had sacrificed intimacy for efficiency. Second, separate facts from stories. Your team missed a deadline. Fact. The story you tell yourself, they're lazy or I failed as a leader. The Stoic pauses that narrative and asks, what evidence do I actually have? Third, interrogate your control. Can you fix the past? No. Can you influence the next steps? Absolutely. Finally, envision the ideal outcome, not just the easiest one. When Satya Nadella took over Microsoft, he didn't ask, how do we make more money? He asked, how do we empower every person on the planet? That shift in framing changed everything. Consider this leadership dilemma. Your top performer delivers results but toxic behavior. The emotional response, make excuses, delay action, fear losing their output. The Stoic approach, apply the 4 steps. The real issue isn't their talent, it's the cultural corrosion. Facts, 3 complaints verified, morale metrics dipping. Control, you can't change their personality, but you can set boundaries. Ideal outcome, a high-performing team where respect isn't negotiable. The decision becomes clear, even if it's hard. Now, apply this to your recent crossroads. Maybe it's hiring choice, a career pivot, or a difficult conversation. Grab a notebook and walk through the steps. Define the core issue in 1 sentence. List only verifiable facts, no interpretations. Circle what's truly in your power. Then ask, if my best self were making this choice, what would they prioritize? That's how Stoics transform decisions from anxiety-fueled guesses into precision instruments. Because clarity isn't about knowing the future, it's about mastering the present. The first light of dawn was sacred to the Stoics, not just a time to wake, but a moment to seize before the world could make its demand. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life." That wasn't poetic exaggeration, it was tactical wisdom. Every great leader understands how you start your morning doesn't just shape your day, it trains your mind for battle. Picture two executives. One wakes to a blaring alarm, scrambles through emails in bed, and rushes into the day already defensive. The other rises deliberately, crafts clarity before chaos, and steps forward with intention. The difference isn't discipline, it's design. A Stoic morning ritual hinges on 3 pillars, each a bulwark against reactivity. First, journaling, not just logging tasks but conducting what Marcus Aurelius called the morning court. Before facing the world, face yourself. Write one sentence answering, "What will I not let corrupt my peace today?" Ancient leaders didn't have smartphones, but they had wax tablets where they'd etch reminders like, "Today you'll meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, but none of these things can deflect you from acting justly." That's not affirmation, it's immunization against distraction. Modern research backs this. A study of Fortune 500 CEOs found that 92% maintain a morning writing practice, not for productivity, but for mental sovereignty. Second, strategic silence. Before absorbing the world's noise, give yourself 10 minutes of pure focus. No screens, no voices, just the rhythm of your breath. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of challenges. Not anxious worrying, but vivid rehearsal. Visualize your toughest meeting, then see yourself responding with calm precision. When Navy SEAL train for hostage rescues, they run mental simulations so detailed that actual missions feel like replays. That's the Stoic edge, turning mornings into a rehearsal studio for excellence. Finally, priority mapping. Most to-do lists are catalogs of reaction emails to answer, fires to put out. The Stoic leader starts differently. Take a blank page and draw 2 columns, controllables and influentials. In the first, list 3 actions fully within your power, maybe refining a presentation, having a crucial conversation, or protecting 90 minutes for deep work. The second column, external variables you can nudge but not command. A client's mood, market shifts, even traffic. This simple act does more than organize. It rewires your locus of control. When LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner schedules his nothing time blocks for unstructured thinking, he's not being indulgent. He's guarding what Seneca called the authority over your own hours. Now here's the invitation. Don't copy this routine, hack it. Maybe your journal lives in a voice memo during your commute. Maybe your silence happens over black coffee while the house sleeps. The form doesn't matter, the function does. Try this for 7 days and watch the shift. Meetings that once triggered you become puzzles to solve. Crises transform from threats to tests of your preparation. Because here's the secret Seneca knew. Mornings aren't about saving time. They're about reclaiming your mind before the world tries to claim it from you. That's how ordinary leaders become architects of their destiny, one deliberate dawn at a time. Epictetus warned his students with brutal clarity. It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. That single sentence cuts to the heart of why ego is the silent saboteur of authority. Think of the last time you saw a leader dismiss feedback, take credit for team wins, or double down on a failing strategy because admitting error felt like weakness. That's not confidence, it's insecurity masquerading as strength. The Stoics recognized this paradox early. The more a leader clings to their self-image, the less room they leave for growth. True authority doesn't come from never being wrong. It comes from being secure enough to say, "I don't know yet." History's greatest leadership collapses share a common thread: unchecked ego. Take the cautionary tale of Blockbuster's CEO Jim Keyes, who dismissed Netflix in 2007 as a very small niche business. His certainty wasn't just wrong, it blinded him to the seismic shift in consumer behavior. While Blockbuster clung to late fees and brick-and-mortar stores, Netflix pivoted to streaming. The result, a $10 billion empire eclipsing a bankrupt relic. Keyes later admitted his fatal flaw: we underestimated the emotional connection people would have with streaming. Translation: he assumed his experience trumped emerging reality. That's the ego trap, confusing tenure with truth, position with perspective. Stoic humility operates differently. It's not self-deprecation, it's ruthless self-awareness. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Throw away your books," he wasn't rejecting knowledge, he was rejecting the vanity of appearing knowledgeable. Consider how Abraham Lincoln assembled his team of rivals, putting his fiercest critics in his cabinet. While lesser leaders surround themselves with sycophants, Lincoln sought dissent not because he lacked conviction, but because his conviction was strong enough to withstand scrutiny. That's the mark of ego-free leadership, the ability to hold your ideas loosely until they're proven right. Now, here's where this gets personal. Every leader faces ego's subtle whispers. Maybe it's the urge to interrupt in meetings to prove your expertise. Maybe it's resisting delegation because no one can do it like I can. Perhaps it's that defensive tightness in your chest when someone critiques your pet project. These aren't signs of failure, they're opportunities for Stoic intervention. The moment you feel that resistance rise, ask Epictetus' mirror question: what am I protecting here, my team's success or my self-image? Your challenge this week: identify one arena where ego might be clouding your judgment. Is it a project you're over-controlling, a conversation you dominate, a blind spot you rationalize away? Then take one deliberate counteraction. If you're the smartest person in every room, invite someone who disagrees with you to lunch. If you default to solo problem solving, publicly credit a team member's solution. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: humility isn't about shrinking, it's about creating space for something greater than your ego to lead. And that's when real authority begins. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You don't have to turn this into something, it doesn't have to upset you." That simple line holds the key to a paradox every leader faces: how to stand with unshakable confidence without tipping into the trap of arrogance. True Stoic assurance isn't about puffing yourself up. It's about grounding yourself so deeply in reason that external validation becomes irrelevant. Think of the difference between a shallow-rooted tree swaying wildly in the wind and an oak whose strength comes from decades of growth beneath the surface. One seeks attention, the other commands respect simply by standing firm. Arrogance is easy to spot. It's the leader who dominates conversations, dismisses dissent, or flexes titles like armor. But Stoic confidence, it's quieter, steadier. It's the CEO who listens more than they speak, the coach who stays calm when the team is rattled, the negotiator who doesn't raise their voice because they know their position is sound. Historians describe George Washington's presence this way: he didn't need to proclaim his authority, it radiated from his stillness, his measured words, his refusal to be rushed into reactions. That's the power of inner stability. When you're anchored in principles rather than ego, people don't just hear you, they lean in. Your body language broadcasts this confidence before you say a word. The Stoics practiced what they called the external discipline, aligning their posture, gaze, and gestures with their inner resolve. Try this before your next high-stakes moment. Stand with your weight evenly balanced, shoulders relaxed but not slouched, hands unclenched. Breathe deeply into your diaphragm. Ancient orators knew this trick to steady the voice. and your eyes hold them steady, not darting or downcast. These aren't power poses, they're presence poses. They signal to your nervous system, I am here fully. Research on courtroom lawyers found that jurors unconsciously trusted those who moved less, not because they were stiff, but because their stillness conveyed certainty. Here's the challenge separating performance from practice. For 1 week, catch yourself in moments where arrogance might disguise itself as confidence, interrupting to prove a point, laughing louder to dominate a room, or brushing off feedback with I know. Pause, ask Marcus Aurelius' mirror question. Is this necessary? Then recalibrate, speak slightly slower, listen with your whole body, let others finish thoughts without rushing to top them. Notice how people respond when your confidence comes from clarity rather than comparison, because the ultimate test of leadership isn't whether others think you're strong, it's whether you feel strong even when no one's watching. That's the Stoic edge, the quiet assurance that doesn't need to announce itself because it knows itself. Adversity isn't the enemy of leadership, it's the forge. Seneca put it bluntly, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Think of the last time you faced a crushing setback, a project derailed, a deal collapsed, a public failure. In that moment, you weren't just losing ground, you were being handed the raw materials for mastery. The greatest leaders in history didn't rise despite their challenges, they rose because of them. When Starbucks lost 42% of its value during the 2008 financial crisis, Howard Schultz didn't just navigate the storm, he used it to dismantle and rebuild the company's entire operating model. The result, a brand that emerged stronger, more adaptable, and more deeply connected to its purpose. That's the Stoic alchemy, turning adversity into advantage. Consider how pressure reshapes decision-making. Neuroscientists have found that under stress, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, can go offline, leaving us reactive and impulsive. But leaders trained in Stoic practices, they rewire this response. Like a pilot in turbulence, they don't fight the storm, they rely on their instruments. Take the story of Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic expedition. When his ship, the Endurance, was trapped and crushed by ice, he faced a choice: surrender to despair or lead his men through 18 months of unimaginable hardship. His secret: daily rituals of focused journaling, maintaining routines, even celebrating birthdays on the ice. By creating structure in chaos, he transformed desperation into disciplined action. Every challenge became a drill in resilience, a lesson in what later became known as the Shackleton Way. Now, here's where most miss the opportunity. They treat adversity as something to endure rather than exploit. The Stoic leader asks a different question. What is this here to teach me? When Sheryl Sandberg lost her husband suddenly, she didn't just grieve, she studied grief. Her book Option B emerged from that crucible, reframing suffering as a curriculum for growth. That's the mindset shift. Adversity isn't a detour from leadership, it's the training ground. Every sleepless night spent troubleshooting, every difficult conversation you'd rather avoid, every unforeseen obstacle, these aren't distractions from your path. They are the path, your turn. Identify one current struggle, maybe a strained team dynamic, a financial pinch, or a personal doubt. Now, apply the Stoics' 3-step reframe. First, interrogate the challenge. What specific skills is this demanding of me? Second, extract the lesson. How could this make me more adaptable, empathetic, or innovative? Third, design the drill. What small, daily practice could turn this obstacle into strength? Maybe it's role-playing tough conversations with a mentor. Maybe it's stress testing your assumptions with contrarian research. The form doesn't matter, the intentionality does, because here's the truth no one tells you. Smooth seas don't make skillful sailors. The storms you're cursing today are the very forces carving you into the leader you're meant to become. Epictetus cut straight to the heart of effective delegation when he said, "Some things are within our control, while others are not." That simple distinction holds the key to one of leadership's greatest paradoxes. The more you try to control everything, the less control you actually wield. Picture two managers, one who hoards tasks like precious gems, terrified that no one will meet their exacting standards, and another who invests time upfront to train their team, then steps back to let them shine. The first may feel indispensable, but the second builds something far more powerful, an organization that can thrive even in their absence. That's Stoic leadership in action, focusing not on doing it all yourself, but on cultivating the conditions where others can excel. Micromanagement isn't just exhausting, it's a silent killer of authority. When you hover over every detail, you send two destructive messages. First, that you don't trust your team's competence, and second, that you see yourself as the sole source of solutions. History's most effective leaders understood this trap. When Abraham Lincoln appointed Ulysses S. Grant to lead the Union Army, critics complained about Grant's drinking and unconventional tactics. Lincoln's response, "I cannot spare this man, he fights." That wasn't blind trust, it was strategic focus on outcomes over process. The result, a general who won the war while Lincoln preserved his energy for higher-order leadership. Here's how to apply Stoic principles to delegation with a trust-building framework. First, clarify the what but release the how. Define the objective clearly. Increase client retention by 15% this quarter, but let your team determine the path. Second, establish checkpoints, not chokeholds. Instead of demanding daily updates, agree on milestone reviews that allow for autonomy. Third, reframe mistakes as tuition. When a team member stumbles, ask Epictetus' defining question. What part of this was within their control? Use the answer to refine their skills, not retract their responsibilities. Consider how tech giant Valve operates without managers, a radical experiment in trust-based delegation. Employees choose their own projects, yet the company consistently innovates because the system forces ownership at every level. The lesson isn't that hierarchies are obsolete, but that authority flows to those who empower rather than constrain. When a marketing director at a Fortune 500 company adopted this approach, shifting from approving every social media post to setting brand guidelines and letting her team create engagement metrics, soared 40%. Why? Because creativity thrives in oxygen, not under a microscope. Your challenge: identify one task that's currently draining your bandwidth but could become someone else's growth opportunity. Maybe it's compiling reports that a junior analyst could handle with proper training. Perhaps it's leading routine meetings that would build a high-potential employee's visibility. Write it down, then apply the Stoics' three-part test. First, does this task truly require my unique skills? Second, who on my team would benefit from owning this? Third, what's the simplest way to set them up for success? Remember, delegation isn't about dumping work, it's about multiplying leadership. Every responsibility you release isn't just time regained, it's a seed of trust planted. And that's how you build not just a team, but a legacy. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You could leave life right now, let that determine what you do and say and think." That stark reminder wasn't morbid, it was the ultimate lens for prioritization. Every leader faces the same relentless truth. Time isn't just money, it's the one currency you can't earn back. The difference between those who merely manage tasks and those who shape legacies comes down to this: the Stoic ability to treat time as a sacred resource, not a renewable one. Picture two executives with identical schedules. One drowns in a sea of urgent but unimportant emails, while the other invests their hours like a strategist allocating focus to the few endeavors that yield exponential returns. That's the essence of Stoic time management, not doing more but doing what matters. The 80/20 rule, Pareto's principle, is Stoicism applied to productivity. 80% of your impact comes from just 20% of your actions. The challenge: most leaders spend their days feeding the 80% that delivers marginal gains. Take a CEO reviewing daily sales reports versus one who carves out 2 hours weekly to mentor high-potential employees. Both are busy, but only one is building lasting leverage. When Warren Buffett was asked how he'd tripled productivity, his answer was pure Stoic simplicity. Write down your top 25 goals, circle the 5 most vital. Avoid the rest at all costs, not because they're unimportant, because they're distractions masquerading as priorities. Here's how to operationalize this. Grab your calendar and color code every meeting, call, and task from last week. Red for reactive, putting out fires, blue for maintenance, routine operations, and green for strategic growth, relationships, innovation. Most leaders find their grids dominated by red and blue. The Stoic correction: ruthlessly defend the green. Block 3 90-minute legacy sessions weekly, untouchable time for high-impact work. When a Fortune 500 CFO adopted this practice, she reclaimed 14 hours a month previously lost to low-value meetings. Her team adapted within weeks, and her division's profitability grew faster than any other. Why? Because time blocking isn't just scheduling, it's signaling what deserves your sovereignty. Now the audit. For the next 72 hours, track every activity in 15-minute increments. No judgment, just observation. Then apply Marcus Aurelius' litmus test. Does this activity expand my influence or just my inbox? You'll spot patterns instantly. Maybe you're over-indexing on tactical work that others could handle. Perhaps quick coffees with colleagues are eating into deep work. The goal isn't to eliminate every minute of downtime, it's to align your hours with your hierarchy of values. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: how you spend your days is how you spend your life. And when you wield time like the finite gift it is, you don't just lead better, you live better. One final practice: every evening, ask Seneca's piercing question: what part of today's time was truly mine, not spent reacting, pleasing, or drifting, but intentionally invested? Then watch how your relationship with time transforms from adversary to ally. That's the Stoic edge, turning the relentless tick of the clock from a source of stress into a sculptor of legacy. Seneca once observed that a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a leader perfected without pressure. Those words weren't just poetic, they were practical battle plans for navigating chaos with unshakable poise. Think of the last time you faced a leadership crisis, a product recall, a public relations firestorm, or a boardroom mutiny. What separates leaders who crumble from those who command in these moments isn't absence of stress, but mastery of response. Ancient Stoics understood this intimately. When Julius Caesar received news that his fleet had been destroyed by a storm, a catastrophe that could have ended his campaign, his recorded response was chillingly calm: "Then we shall sail in winter." No panic, no blame, just immediate recalibration. That's the Stoic secret: not avoiding pressure, but transforming it into focus. Let's dissect the physiology behind this. When crisis hits, your amygdala triggers fight or flight mode, pupils dilate, heart rate spikes, fine motor skills decline. It's biology's way of preparing you to outrun a lion, not negotiate a merger. But here's what Seneca knew 2,000 years before neuroscience: breath is the lever to override this response. Try this battlefield-tested technique next time pressure mounts. First, square your posture, standing or seated, to signal control to your nervous system. Second, inhale deeply through your nose for 4 seconds, filling your diaphragm like a bellows. Third, hold that breath for 7 seconds, focusing on a single anchoring thought, perhaps your core mission or a personal mantra. Finally, exhale slowly through pursed lips for 8 seconds, releasing tension physically and mentally. This 4-7-8 rhythm isn't just calming. It chemically counters cortisol with oxygen, restoring access to your prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for rational decisions. History's most composed leaders share this ritual. When the Chilean miners were trapped underground in 2010, their shift foreman Luis Urzúa used similar breathing techniques to maintain order during 69 days of darkness. Rather than succumbing to claustrophobia or despair, he established routines, mediated conflicts, and even organized religious services, all while modeling steady respiration that kept panic at bay. When rescue finally came, his men emerged not as traumatized victims, but as a disciplined unit. That's the power of Stoic breathing. It doesn't just steady you, it radiates calm to everyone within your influence. Now, apply this to your leadership crucible. Maybe it's delivering bad news to shareholders or navigating a high-stakes negotiation. Before you speak, take 3 deliberate breaths using the 4-7-8 method. Notice how your voice stays measured, your thoughts ordered, your presence amplified. Record yourself doing this versus reacting impulsively. The difference will astound you. Because here's the truth most miss: composure isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about creating just enough space between stimulus and response to choose your battlefield. That's how ordinary leaders become anchors in the storm, not by avoiding the waves, but by learning to breathe beneath them. Your challenge: within the next 24 hours, identify one routine stressor, perhaps your Monday morning meeting or a weekly performance review, and apply this breathing pattern beforehand. Observe how it changes your interaction. Then, when true crisis strikes, you won't be practicing, you'll be performing. As Seneca reminded us, we are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting time in panic. Every conscious breath is a rebellion against that waste, a reclamation of your authority. And in leadership, as in life, the ones who control their breath ultimately control the room. Epictetus offered a radical perspective on competition when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That simple shift in focus from external rivals to internal progress changes everything about how leaders approach rivalry. Think of the difference between 2 athletes training for the Olympics. One obsesses over their competitors' times, letting each rival's success become a personal indictment. The other measures progress against their own last performance, using competition as a whetstone to sharpen their edge. Both are driven, but only one is free. That's the Stoic distinction. Healthy competition fuels growth, unhealthy comparison poisons purpose. History's most enduring leaders understood this balance. Take the legendary rivalry between Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. Edison clung to his direct current system with territorial desperation, resorting to public smear campaigns against Tesla's alternating current. Tesla, by contrast, focused so intensely on perfecting his own technology that he often forgot to patent his inventions. The result: Edison died bitter, while Tesla's innovations outlasted him, even if he never reaped their financial rewards. The lesson isn't that competition is bad. It's that fixation on competitors distorts vision. When Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella took over, he stopped measuring success solely against Apple and Google. Instead, he asked, how can we create value no one else is? That shift propelled Microsoft's cloud division to outpace rivals by focusing on unmet needs rather than head-to-head battles. Healthy competition in the Stoic tradition has 3 markers. First, it's directional. You're running toward mastery, not just away from defeat. Second, it's ethical. You'd proudly share your tactics with competitors because they're rooted in excellence, not exploitation. Third, it's energizing. It leaves you inspired, not insecure. Contrast this with toxic rivalry, which manifests as sleepless nights over others' promotions, schadenfreude when peers stumble, or cutting corners to win. The Stoic leader audits their competitive mindset by asking Epictetus' razor question: is this rivalry making me better or just bitter? Consider the story of Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard, who transformed outdoor apparel by competing unconventionally. When rivals raced to cheaper overseas production, he invested in regenerative organic cotton. While competitors chased quarterly growth, he famously took out an ad urging customers not to buy his jackets unless truly needed. Critics called it business suicide, yet Patagonia's revenue tripled over the next decade, proving that ethical competition isn't just noble, it's strategically brilliant. Chouinard's secret: he treated competition like a mountain climb. The goal wasn't to beat others to the summit, but to summit with integrity. Now, examine your own competitive pulse. When a colleague lands the project you wanted, does it spark determination or resentment? When you see a competitor's triumph, do you dissect their methods or drown in self-doubt? Grab your journal and answer 2 questions. What's one way rivalry has recently improved me? And what's one way it's cost me peace? Then, apply the Stoics' reframe. Redirect energy from tracking others to surpassing your own standards. Because true leadership isn't about being better than anyone else, it's about being better than you used to be. That's how rivalry stops being a threat and starts becoming your greatest teacher. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." That single metaphor captures the heart of Stoic teamwork. Your growth is inseparable from your team's growth. Imagine 2 departments facing a company-wide crisis. One fractures under pressure, with members hiding mistakes and blaming each other. The other rallies, sharing information freely and volunteering for tough tasks. The difference isn't talent or resources, it's culture. A team grounded in Stoic values doesn't just survive adversity, it uses adversity to forge unbreakable trust. Transparency is the first pillar of Stoic teamwork. Ancient generals like Marcus Aurelius held daily councils where even junior officers could voice concerns, not as complaints, but as contributions to the collective mission. Modern research confirms this. A Harvard study found that teams practicing radical transparency solve problems 30% faster than those where information is hoarded. But Stoic transparency goes deeper than data sharing. It's about creating psychological safety, the freedom to say, "I messed up" or "I need help" without fear of punishment. When SpaceX's Falcon 1 rocket failed 3 consecutive launches, Elon Musk emailed his entire company with 3 words: "Full disclosure, no blame." That shift from shame to solutions unlocked the innovations that later made SpaceX dominant. Accountability is the second pillar, not the punitive kind, but the empowering variety. The Stoics called this prosoph, the discipline of attention to one's duties. Picture a surgical team where each member knows their roles so precisely that instruments are passed without words. That seamless coordination doesn't come from micromanagement. It comes from each person taking radical ownership. When a Zappos customer service rep once spent 10 hours on a single customer call, with full managerial support, they weren't being inefficient. They were embodying the Stoic ideal that every team member's actions reflect the whole. Building resilience is where these pillars converge. Stoic teams don't avoid stress, they inoculate against it through deliberate practice. Navy SEAL train this way, not by avoiding cold water, but by swimming in it until their bodies adapt. For your team, this might mean quarterly stress tests where you simulate crises, a server crash, a PR scandal, a supply chain rupture. The goal isn't to scare anyone, but to reveal your collective reflexes. After each simulation, conduct a Stoic-style postmortem. What did we control? Where did we excel? What needs hardening? Your challenge this week: model one Stoic value for your team. Maybe it's transparency, sharing a mistake you made and how you're fixing it. Perhaps it's accountability, publicly crediting a colleague's idea you previously took for granted. Or resilience, leading a lessons learned session after a setback without assigning blame. Watch how small acts compound, because the ultimate test of leadership isn't what you achieve alone, it's what your team achieves when you're not in the room. That's the Stoic legacy, building not just results, but people who build results. Seneca once observed that speech is the mirror of the soul, and nowhere does this shine clearer than in negotiation. Picture two executives at a high-stakes deal table. One leans forward, fingers drumming, sentences peppered with urgent and final offer. The other sits back, listens intently, and responds with measured silence before speaking. Guess who walks away with better terms? The Stoic negotiator knows this truth. Patience isn't just a virtue, it's leverage. When you refuse to be rushed, you reveal the strength of your position without saying a word. Ancient Stoics like Seneca trained for these moments through what they called premeditatio, the premeditation of challenges. Before entering any negotiation, they'd mentally rehearse worst-case scenarios, the lowball offer, the aggressive counterpart, even outright rejection. This wasn't pessimism, it was emotional inoculation. Modern research backs this up. A Harvard Business School study found that negotiators who spent just 5 minutes visualizing calm responses secured deals with 11% better terms than reactive counterparts. The lesson: composure isn't just calming, it's profitable. Here's the 3-part Stoic framework for win-win outcomes. First, separate people from problems. When tensions rise, the untrained mind conflates the two. This client is unreasonable becomes, this client is out to get me. The Stoic corrects this by asking, what's the shared goal here? In a famous example, when Starbucks faced a trademark dispute with Ethiopia over coffee names, most expected a bitter legal battle. Instead, CEO Howard Schultz flew to Addis Ababa, framed the conversation around mutual growth, and crafted a licensing deal that doubled Ethiopian farmers' incomes while securing premium beans for Starbucks. That's Stoic negotiation, solving together, not scoring points. Second, anchor to principles, not emotions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In deal-making, this translates to refusing mirror others' aggression. When Apple's Tim Cook negotiated with suppliers, he famously avoided Steve Jobs' intimidating style. Instead, he'd present data calmly. Here's what's fair based on market rates. Suppliers often conceded terms voluntarily because Cook's approach made greed feel illogical. Your toolkit for this: prepare objective criteria, industry standards, third-party valuations before any negotiation. When emotions flare, redirect to these benchmarks like a compass needle finding true north. Third, create exit ramps for egos. The Stoics understood that saving face often matters more than the deal itself. In a tense acquisition negotiation, a tech CEO once diffused conflict by saying, "Help me understand how we can adjust this so you can champion it internally." That simple reframe transformed the counterpart from adversary to ally. Similarly, when Sony's PlayStation team negotiated exclusives with game studios, they'd always leave one minor concession on the table, not because they had to, but so developers could claim a win to their teams. Now your turn. Think of an upcoming negotiation, a salary discussion, a vendor contract, even a family budget talk. Apply Seneca's patience drill. Rehearse 3 calm responses to potential provocations. Then map your framework using the Stoics' 3 pillars: shared goals, objective benchmarks, and ego-preserving exits. And remember Epictetus's razor: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. The more you listen, the more you'll hear the unspoken needs that become your leverage. Because true negotiation mastery isn't about dominating the conversation. It's about steering it with the quiet confidence of someone who knows the storm outside can't rattle the calm within. The evening hours hold a quiet power for leaders, not just to rest but to refine. Epictetus captured this when he said, "Don't let your reflection go to sleep until you've accounted for each day." That wasn't about tallying wins and losses. It was about mining the day's raw experiences for wisdom. Imagine 2 executives ending identical days. One scrolls through emails until exhaustion wins. The other sits with a notebook, dissecting moments with the precision of a jeweler examining gems. The difference: one wakes tomorrow no wiser, the other wakes sharper. Stoic journaling isn't diary keeping, it's deliberate self-auditing. Start with 3 questions that cut through noise. First, where did I act with virtue today? Not what went well, but where you embodied wisdom, courage, justice, or temperance. Maybe you stayed calm in a heated meeting, temperance, or gave honest feedback despite discomfort, courage. Next, where did I surrender my agency? Stoics call these moral stains, moments you blamed externals instead of owning your response. That snapped reply to a colleague. The procrastination on a tough decision. Note it without judgment, just observation. Finally, what's one lesson today offers for tomorrow? Not grand insights, but tactical upgrades. Perhaps you noticed early meetings drain your focus, so you'll block creative work afterward. History's most effective leaders ritualized this. Theodore Roosevelt kept meticulous diaries, analyzing interactions like a scientist studying specimens. After losing the 1912 election, his entries didn't dwell on opponents' tactics, they dissected his own missteps in strategy and tone. That discipline didn't just fuel his comeback, it modeled accountability for his entire team. Modern research validates this. A study of Fortune 500 CEOs found those who journaled regularly made fewer repetitive mistakes and delegated more effectively. Why? Because reflection turns experience into intentional growth. Try this practice for 7 nights. Use a physical notebook. The act of writing slows thought, revealing patterns screens hide. Keep entries concise. Marcus Aurelius' meditations were often just bullet points. Over time, you'll spot themes. Maybe impatience peaks when you skip lunch, or courage falters in consensus-driven meetings. These aren't flaws, they're data points for leadership upgrades. And here's the unexpected benefit. This nightly audit, it doesn't just improve decisions, it cultivates something rare in leaders: self-compassion. When you witness your struggles without drama, you stop fearing missteps and start treating them as training drills. The true test comes when you face a crisis. Leaders who journal don't just react, they draw from a reservoir of past reflections. That moment of calm in the boardroom, it's not innate talent. It's the cumulative effect of 100 nightly course corrections. So tonight, before sleep claims you, steal 10 minutes. Not to plan tomorrow's battles, but to learn from today's skirmishes. Because the most powerful leadership tool isn't your title or strategy. It's the quiet discipline of turning daily stumbles into stepping stones. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." That simple truth holds the antidote to one of leadership's greatest thieves: burnout. Not the temporary exhaustion after a big project, but the slow drain that comes from pouring out more than you replenish. Picture two leaders, one running on caffeine and cortisol, mistaking busyness for purpose, while the other moves with the steady rhythm of the tides, intense in action, deliberate in rest. The difference isn't stamina, it's strategy. Stoicism doesn't glorify grinding yourself to dust. It teaches the art of sustainable fire. Burnout sneaks in disguised as dedication. Early signs: you ration patience like a scarce resource, snap at minor setbacks, or find yourself staring at screens without absorbing words. Your passion projects start feeling like obligations, and even small decisions trigger overwhelm. The ancient Stoics recognized this long before modern psychology gave it a name. They called it intemperantia, the imbalance that occurs when we sacrifice self-governance on the altar of external demands. When the Roman senator Seneca noticed his temper shortening and focus scattering, he didn't push harder. He retreated to his country villa for weeks of reading, writing, and recalibration. Not as escapism, but as essential maintenance. Consider the story of a Fortune 500 CEO who hit the wall after years of non-stop performance. Despite record profits, she found herself dreading mornings, resenting her team, and lying awake with a racing mind. Her turning point came when she rediscovered Marcus Aurelius' practice of dividing the day, mapping hours not just for work but for restoration. She instituted what she called Stoic pauses, 20-minute walks without devices, mandatory lunch breaks away from her desk, and a firm rule to never check emails after 8 p.m. Within months, her creativity rebounded, and her leadership became more compassionate, not because she worked less, but because she stopped conflating presence with productivity. Here's how to apply Stoic balance proactively. First, audit your energy leaks. For 1 week, track not just what you do, but how each activity drains or fuels you. That client who leaves you exhausted, the strategic work that energizes you, those patterns reveal your real limits. Second, practice voluntary discomfort, not to punish yourself, but to reconnect with simple sufficiency. Try a digital Sabbath where you spend a full day offline, or take a poverty meal once a week, eating plainly to remember that abundance isn't found in excess. These exercises aren't deprivations, they're recalibrations. Finally, redefine rest as resistance, not to responsibility, but to the cultural lie that exhaustion equals excellence. When a Navy SEAL platoon trains, they schedule mandatory recovery periods after intense drills because they know muscles grow during rest, not strain. Your mind operates the same way. The Stoics weren't against ambition, they were against ambition without guardrails. As Epictetus warned, no man is free who is not master of himself. That includes mastery over your own sustainability. Your turn. Tonight, ask yourself Marcus Aurelius' evening question: what did I do today that was truly necessary? Then go deeper. What did I do today that truly nourished me? The gap between those answers holds the key to leading not just effectively, but enduringly. Because the world doesn't need leaders who burn bright and burn out, it needs those who shine steadily, illuminating the way for others long after the first spark has faded. Seneca once wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness," a radical notion in today's hyper-transactional professional world where networking often feels like collecting business cards rather than cultivating connections. The difference between the two approaches: one builds Rolodexes, the other builds legacies. Think about the last industry event you attended. Were you scanning the room for who could advance your career, or genuinely curious about the stories behind the name tags? That distinction separates surface-level contacts from the kind of relationships that withstand economic downturns, career shifts, and even personal crises. Transactional networking operates on a simple but flawed equation. If I give you X, you owe me Y. It's the linked-in connection request that immediately pitches a product, the coffee meeting where someone checks their watch after 15 minutes once they realize you can't help their promotion. These interactions aren't just ineffective, they erode trust. Contrast this with the Stoic approach, where every interaction is an end in itself. When Seneca corresponded with his friend Lucilius, he wasn't angling for favors, he was investing in mutual growth. Centuries later, their letters became timeless works of philosophy. Imagine if they'd treated each other as stepping stones rather than kindred spirits. History would have lost a masterpiece. Authentic networking thrives on 3 Stoic principles. First, virtuous intent. Enter every conversation asking, "How can I add value here?" without keeping score. When Sheryl Sandberg mentored young women early in her career, she didn't do it to build a loyal faction. She did it because lifting others aligned with her values. Those relationships later became the backbone of her lean-in movement. Second, active listening. The Stoics called this process full attention to the present moment. At a conference, most people are half listening while rehearsing their next talking point. The rare leader who leans in, asks unexpected questions, and remembers personal details. That's how IBM's former CEO Sam Palmisano turned casual contacts into a global idea network that fueled innovation. Third, long-term patience. Genuine connections mature slowly like oak trees. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger's 6-decade partnership didn't blossom overnight. It grew through years of shared challenges and intellectually honest debates. Here's your challenge. Identify one professional relationship you've kept superficial, maybe a colleague you only email when you need something, or a mentor you haven't thanked meaningfully in months. This week, take one action to deepen it. Send an article that made you think of their work, invite them for a walk instead of a transactional coffee, or simply ask, "What's one challenge I could help you think through?" No agenda, no ask, just presence, because the Stoics knew a truth modern professionals forget. The most powerful networks aren't built on what people can do for you, but on who you become together. And that kind of connection doesn't just advance careers, it enriches lives. Epictetus cut straight to the heart of vision with a razor-sharp question. If you were given the opportunity to design your life from scratch, what would you keep and what would you burn? That's not hypothetical musing, it's the foundation of Stoic purpose. Too many leaders confuse vision with vague aspirations like "be successful" or "grow the company." The Stoic approach is different. It demands that every ambition passes through 2 filters. Does this serve my highest principles? And will this outlive me? Picture 2 entrepreneurs. One chases quarterly targets with frenetic energy, while the other builds a company like Sabine Selassie, who turned her Brooklyn bookstore into a literacy movement by tying every decision to a single question. How does this help someone fall in love with reading? That's vision forged in Stoic fire. Crafting this kind of purposeful vision starts with 3 Stoic disciplines. First, backcasting, a technique Marcus Aurelius used in his journals. Instead of projecting forward from today, project backward from your deathbed. What will you want to have stood for? When Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard made his company's mission, "We're in business to save our home planet," he wasn't crafting a slogan, he was answering that ultimate question. Second, constraint mapping. The Stoics believed limitations reveal true priorities. Try this. Draft your vision using only 7 words. When SpaceX reduced their purpose to making humanity multiplanetary, every engineering decision gained clarity. Third, virtue alignment. For each element of your vision, ask, does this cultivate wisdom, courage, justice, or temperance? When Microsoft Satya Nadella reframed their mission around empowering every person, he wasn't discarding profit, he was ensuring profit served purpose. Consider how Starbucks' Howard Schultz applied this during the 2008 crisis. Facing plummeting sales, he didn't just want to recover, he reconnected with his original vision to inspire the human spirit. That led to radical decisions like closing every U.S. store for racial bias training. Critics called it costly, but Schultz's new vision isn't about convenience, it's about conviction. The result, a brand that emerged stronger because every stakeholder understood what it stood for when profits weren't enough. Now, your turn, grab paper and divide it into 3 columns. In the first, list what you're currently building: projects, relationships, habits. In the second, write Epictetus' deathbed question: would this make me proud? In the third, begin drafting your 7-word purpose statement. No buzzwords, no jargon, just raw truth. Maybe it's teach 10,000 kids to think critically, or build technology that heals before it sells. Whatever emerges, stress test it with the Stoics' nightly audit. Did today's choices honor this? Because true vision isn't what you post on office walls, it's what whispers to you in quiet moments, steering you when no one's watching. That's how ordinary plans become extraordinary legacies. Marcus Aurelius warned that even at the height of his power as emperor, the applause of the crowd is as fleeting as the echo in a canyon. That insight cuts to the heart of Stoic success, not the absence of achievement, but the refusal to be intoxicated by it. Picture 2 leaders celebrating major wins. One basks in the spotlight, measuring worth by standing ovations. The other quietly notes how quickly the clapping fades, then rolls up their sleeves to solve the next problem. The difference isn't modesty, it's mastery over the most seductive trap of all, the illusion that external validation equals enduring worth. True Stoic humility isn't about downplaying accomplishments, it's about contextualizing them. When Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman received the highest honor in his field, he spent his acceptance speech dismantling his own theories, highlighting where future researchers should correct his work. That wasn't false humility, it was rigorous recognition that every victory is provisional. The Stoics called this memento mori, remembering that even emperors return to dust. Modern leaders practice it by asking, if I lost everything but my character, what would remain? Complacency isn't just laziness, it's forgetting that success is a current, not a destination. Consider the fall of BlackBerry. In 2009, they controlled half the smartphone market, with executives famously dismissing the iPhone as a toy. Their mistake wasn't resting on laurels, it was assuming laurels were permanent. Contrast this with Satya Nadella's first email as Microsoft CEO, an announcement not of triumph, but of the need to rediscover our soul. Despite record profits years later, he still begins meetings by discussing failures. That's Stoic success hygiene, scrubbing away the residue of past wins to stay hungry for what's next. Gratitude is the antidote to arrogance. Ancient Stoics began each day by listing what they'd lost, not to dwell in lack, but to viscerally appreciate what remained. Modern research reveals why this works. Gratitude practice literally rewires neural pathways, reducing ego-centering activity in the prefrontal cortex. When Oprah Winfrey instituted her gratitude journal ritual at the peak of her fame, she wasn't just counting blessings, she was safeguarding her ability to keep creating. The most powerful version, thanking those overlooked in success, the assistant who stayed late, the mentor who gave tough feedback, that's humility in action. Your turn, recall a recent win, a promotion, a finished project, even a personal breakthrough. Now apply the Stoics' 3-lens reflection. First, temporal. How will this matter in 5 years? Second, comparative. Who contributed to this that I haven't acknowledged? Third, existential. Does this align with what I'd once said at my eulogy? Not to diminish your achievement, but to anchor it in something sturdier than applause. Because the paradox of Stoic success is this: the less you need it to define you, the more freely you can pursue it. And that's when the real work begins. Seneca once wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." And for the Stoic leader, that wisdom begins with the pages you choose to let shape your mind. Imagine two executives with identical schedules. One scrolls through endless news feeds, absorbing fragments of distraction. The other dedicates 30 minutes daily to books that have weathered centuries. The difference isn't just knowledge, it's the depth of thought that separates reactive managers from visionary leaders. Your reading list isn't a hobby, it's the silent architect of your authority. Start with Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, the private journal of history's most powerful Stoic. Written not for publication but for personal discipline, its pages reveal how an emperor steadied his mind amid wars and plagues. Key takeaway: leadership isn't about controlling events, but mastering your judgments about them. When Sheryl Sandberg faced her husband's sudden death, she turned to this text for its unflinching focus on what we can control, a lesson she later credited with her return to steering Facebook through crisis. Next, Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, essentially a leadership mentorship in book form. These 2,000-year-old letters to his friend Lucilius dissect ambition, failure, and time management with startling modernity. Highlight his essay on the shortness of life, which reframes busyness as poverty. You're living as if destined to live forever. Modern leaders like Tim Ferriss return to this annually to purge trivial pursuits. For tactical application, grab Epictetus' Enchiridion or Handbook. This compact manual was carried into battle by Roman generals. Its power lies in blunt drills. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. When Starbucks' Howard Schultz reinvigorated the company's culture, he distributed excerpts to executives, urging them to separate external noise from internal principles. But Stoic leadership isn't confined to ancient texts. Pair these with Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way, which bridges philosophy to modern case studies, from Amelia Earhart's navigation strategies to Steve Jobs' exile-era resilience. Holiday's core argument: Stoicism isn't theoretical. It's the operating system of those who turn setbacks into breakthroughs. Why does this matter? Neuroscience reveals that deep reading, unlike skimming, strengthens the brain's ability to focus, empathize, and think in systems. A Yale study found that executives who read at least 30 minutes daily demonstrate sharper decision-making and emotional regulation. But here's the Stoic twist: it's not about volume. Seneca warned against hopping from book to book without absorption. Better to revisit one page of Marcus Aurelius daily than devour volumes without reflection. Your challenge: pick one book from this list not to finish but to use. Keep it by your desk and open it for 5 minutes each morning like a mental warm-up. Underline passages that resonate, then journal how they apply to that day's challenges. Notice how slowly, steadily, these words cease to be philosophy and become part of your leadership DNA. Because the Stoics knew a secret: you don't just read these books, you let them read you, exposing gaps in your thinking and lighting paths you couldn't see alone. That's how ink on a page becomes authority in action. Epictetus laid the foundation for Stoic conflict resolution with one piercing observation: people are not disturbed by things but by the views they take of them. That single principle changes everything when tensions flare. Imagine two colleagues locked in a heated debate over project direction. One sees the disagreement as a personal attack, the other views it as a puzzle to solve. The facts remain identical, the conflict transforms based on their interpretations. This is the Stoic superpower in action. the ability to step back from emotional narratives and examine the raw architecture of the dispute. Start by separating the signal from the noise. Every conflict has three layers: the trigger, a missed deadline, a blunt email; the story each party tells themselves, "They don't respect me," and the underlying need: autonomy, recognition. The Stoic mediator focuses on the first and third while dissolving the second. Take a real-world case from a tech startup. Two engineers, Alex and Jordan, nearly came to blows over code revisions. Alex saw Jordan's pushback as sabotage. Jordan interpreted Alex's persistence as arrogance. Their manager applied Stoic principles by asking, "What's the shared goal here?" Both wanted robust, secure software. They'd just lost sight of it in the skirmish. Here's your 4-step Stoic mediation framework. First, pause the reaction cycle. Implement a 24-hour rule before addressing heated issues, a cooling-off period Romans called tempus meditare. Second, map perspectives objectively. Have each party complete this sentence. From my vantage point, the core issue is, and what I need is. No accusations, just observations. Third, identify control zones. Together, list what's within everyone's influence, communication tone. Next steps versus what's not, past actions, market conditions. Finally, design forward experiments. Instead of demanding permanent resolutions, agree on small behavioral tests. For 2 weeks, we'll share draft code earlier, or we'll start meetings by stating assumptions. Consider how a hospital administrator used this when nurses and surgeons clashed over scheduling. Rather than taking sides, she facilitated a session where both groups wrote their non-negotiable needs on index cards, then physically arranged them into overlapping priorities. The visual alone revealed common ground no one had voiced. Within months, their conflict became a case study in cross-department collaboration. Your challenge: identify a current friction point, whether with a co-worker, family member, or even your own competing priorities. Apply the Stoics' conflict audit. What's the trigger versus the story you're telling? What part can you actually influence? Then propose one micro-experiment to shift the dynamic, because true resolution doesn't come from changing others, it comes from mastering how you meet the moment. And that's where ordinary leaders become peacemakers. Marcus Aurelius left us with a question that cuts to the heart of leadership's ultimate measure. What we do now echoes in eternity. Not as hyperbole, but as literal truth, your decisions today ripple through generations in ways you'll never fully witness. Consider 2 executives retiring after decades of work. One spent years chasing quarterly targets, leaving behind faded trophies and forgotten initiatives. The other planted seeds, mentoring proteges who became industry changemakers, instituting policies that outlasted their tenure, building systems that thrived without them. The difference isn't effort, it's intentionality about what endures when the spotlight fades. History's most revered leaders understood this distinction. When Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he didn't just aim to win a war, he sought to bind up the nation's wounds so thoroughly that future citizens would inherit a more perfect union. Contrast this with the collapse of Enron, where short-term stock manipulation erased billions and shattered lives within months. Both leaders faced pressure. Only one asked, "What will remain when I'm gone?" That's the Stoics' litmus test for every decision. Does this create value that transcends my presence? Take the story of Paul Polman, former CEO of Unilever. When he took the helm in 2009, shareholders demanded immediate cost-cutting. Instead, he launched the Sustainable Living Plan, diverting resources to reduce environmental impact while pledging to double revenue. Critics called it suicidal idealism. A decade later, Unilever's sustainable brands grew 46% faster than others. proving ethics and economics aren't opposing forces when you lead with legacy lenses. Pullman's secret: he stopped giving quarterly earnings guidance altogether, forcing investors to evaluate the company in years, not fiscal periods. That's Stoic leadership in action, trading applause for endurance. Your legacy isn't built in grand pronouncements, but in daily micro-choices. When a middle school principal in Detroit noticed students struggling with trauma, she didn't just hire more counselors, she transformed the building into a healing-centered school, training janitors to recognize distress signals and turning the cafeteria into a safe space. 5 years later, graduation rates soared, but her real legacy was the blueprint she left for educators nationwide. That's the power of systems over gestures. They keep giving long after you've moved on. Now here's your challenge. Picture your own professional funeral 20 years from now. Not the eulogies about titles or wealth, but the quiet stories colleagues will share over coffee. What do you hope they remember? The way you calmed the room during crises, the junior employer you sponsored who's now revolutionizing the field, the policy you championed that still protects people you'll never meet. Grab a notebook and finish this sentence: I'll know I led well when. Then audit one current project through that lens, because legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what keeps growing without you. That's how Stoics transform leadership from a role into a ripple. Resilience, clarity, and virtue, these three Stoic pillars don't just build leaders, they forge commanders of chaos, the kind who stand unshaken when others crumble. Think of resilience as your inner armor, hammered strong by every setback you've reframed as fuel. Clarity, that's your compass in the fog of war, the ability to separate what's yours to control from the noise that drowns weaker minds. And virtue, the often overlooked superpower, is what ensures your ambition never outpaces your integrity. Together, they form the bedrock of authority that doesn't demand respect but effortlessly commands it. History's most formidable leaders, from Marcus Aurelius on the battlefield to modern CEOs in boardrooms, shared one non-negotiable truth: mastery begins within. No title, no strategic playbook, no charismatic speech can compensate for a fractured inner foundation. When Howard Schultz returned to Starbucks during its darkest hour, he didn't just overhaul operations. He rebuilt the company's soul by first steadying his own. That's the Stoic secret. You can't dominate your field until you've first dominated your impulses, your fears, your ego. Seneca put it best: he who is brave is free. Not free from challenges, but free within them, unshackled from the petty distractions that derail ordinary leaders. That freedom isn't gifted, it's seized through daily practice. Maybe it's the 5 minutes you spend journaling each morning, aligning your actions with your principles. Perhaps it's the breath you take before responding to criticism, creating just enough space to choose logic over reaction. Or the quiet courage to admit when you're wrong, transforming mistakes into stepping stones rather than skeletons in your closet. Here's your challenge: before the day ends, apply one Stoic technique with ruthless intentionality. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control, writing down what's yours to command and releasing the rest. Or the premeditation of obstacles, visualizing your toughest meeting and rehearsing your calm response. Action is what separates admirers of philosophy from practitioners of power. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this isn't the end, it's your beginning. Every Thursday, we dive deeper into the Stoic strategies that turn pressure into advantage and ambition into legacy. The next video, it's all about the Stoic art of strategic silence, how saying less can make you heard more. But for now, remember Seneca's parting words: you're the craftsman of your own character. So tell me in the comments what's your first move to forge it stronger. Because the field is waiting, and it's yours to dominate.